live. Welcome, everybody. This is, I have to tell you, this feels like Vegas. When you watch, if you've done webinars in the background before, at the beginning, you see 4 panelists and then you hit the button and it says start webinar and then everybody starts to come in and you're like, oh, it's so exciting. They keep rolling in, ching, 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 ching.
I love it.
Silly, but we take our wins where we can get them. Small moments of joy.
I love the sound effects, LB. You brought me right back to Vegas. Like,
but they still have the sound effects, even though they just give you the ticket. Remember when it was quarters?
yes.
Big old buckets of dirty money.
Now you
can take your kids to Vegas. I thought that was ridiculous when I saw people doing it 20 years ago, but I did it like 2 years ago. I had a speaking engagement there and I was like, we went to a magic show. My kid got called up on stage. We did the, tournament of kings and roller coasters. There's a decent amount there. It was very scary walking places after 8 p.m. However, what's wrong with that person?
I have a story for you, but not for this panel.
Maybe not now and live on the webinar. Yeah. You're just joining us. We are BSing and having some fun before we start talking about Vegas. I cannot wait to get started. We're going to make negotiation our superpower, and we're going to get started in just about a minute. This is the awkward silence that we all have.
This is the awkward silence. Well, and speaking of Vegas, I'll fill it with a little bit of Vegas.
Oh, good.
A few years ago, we drove across country with my mother-in-law and my 18-year-old niece. And
that sounds like fun.
Yeah. It's good family member that I am. And we stopped through Vegas for like less than a day and a half.
Yeah, that's about the amount of time you want to be in Vegas.
Yes, and it was during this thing called the Electronic Daisy Carnival, which is like a big EDM thing that I guess, I don't even know. The look on my 100% Italian mother-in-law's face and my 18-year-old niece that had barely been out of the town that she grew up in, that was priceless. I'm like, yes, there's a person just wearing nothing but their underwear walking through Vegas. That's
happening right now.
And that's okay here, but that's not okay anywhere else. So
that's just an everyday occurrence when you're working from home, right?
The new normal at my house.
The new normal.
Normal.
That's awesome. Yes.
Oh, that's so good. That's so good. All right, shall we get this party started? We have so much to talk about and I'm really excited. Welcome, everybody. My name is Lauren Bailey. My friends call me LB. You're here as part of one of the quarterly free training webinars that we put on for the Factor 8 and Girls Club community. These are topics that are requested by you. So if you've got a request right now, stick it into chat and we'll get it on our list. My job is then to go find amazing humans and content to bring that session to life. And I think we've knocked it out of the park today. So I want to start by saying thank you to our sponsors, Level 11 by Ascent Cloud and Outreach. If you want help motivating what matters, you need to check out Level 11. Kate's going to chat that in for us. And if you want more opportunities to negotiate sales deals, and you're one of the few people who don't already have Outreach, click the link Kate's putting in now to request a demo. Let's meet our panel. Here we go. Folks, please meet Amy Volas. Amy Volas is one of Sales Hacker's most dynamic women in sales. She's a heavy sales hitter turned entrepreneur, putting that sales expertise to work and now helping companies find talent with her new company and baby, Avenue Talent Partners. She helps growing startups acquire some of the most valuable assets, sales leaders and enterprise sellers. Amy has the negotiation lens of both the buyer and the seller when we talk about negotiating new roles and comp packages. So that's going to be really insightful. Plus, she's just uber cool, no BS, and someone I really admire. So you ready to have some fun, Amy?
I am, and right back at you. And thank you for including me. I'm excited about this. It's go time.
It's go time. David Lineweber. David serves as the CEO of Ascent Cloud, an industry-leading provider of sales enablement and performance management SaaS solutions. He brings over a decade of experience in enterprise software, working in product roles, marketing roles, sales, and senior executive roles. Prior to running Ascent Cloud, he served as CEO of Level 11, fantastic SaaS solution helping leaders motivate, engage, and coach their teams. He's also a proud sponsor of Girls Club. Yay, David, thank you. He's going to help us with the point of view of both the job negotiations, yes, he's hiring, and sales contracts. And to be fair, I'm going to hit him up occasionally for the male point of view on this mostly female panel. So thank you for bringing the brave lone male with us, David.
Lauren, it's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me.
Yay, I'm excited. All right. What a cool lady I have been recommended to, Nicole Anasinas. She's our money lady. She spent her career in tech building and building and transforming businesses, most recently as the CFO and COO of Squarespace. She served as CFO for Infor, helping them transition to the SaaS business model. One more amazing name, she spent 17 years with IBM in various leadership positions in corporate finance, M&A, and market development. She's a Wharton MBA and multiple board member, and she's passionate about driving gender equity in tech. So of course we love her. She's also a self-admitted novice at negotiating for herself, and we get that. So thank you for that transparency. She's going to give us the behind the scenes money point of view today. So no pressure, Nicole, but we're going to come to you for like basically every answer. Okay.
Sounds good.
All right. Thank you for being here. All right. My new favorite female sales leader, Michelle Benfer. Michelle has sold and led sales teams at some of the biggest names in media and technology, including Condé Nast, Meredith Corp, AOL, and LogMeIn. Today, she serves as the VP of Sales and Marketing of sales for the sales, marketing, and service CRM giant HubSpot. I even wrote that part down so I didn't screw it up because HubSpot does everything. I'm a HubSpot user and lover. And of course, then I messed it up. So there you go. Michelle is passionate about fostering diverse and inclusive sales teams and a culture of high performance. She lives outside Boston with 2 daughters and her beloved pup, Rosie, who we just met. And get this, Michelle loves negotiating. Buying her car every year is an occasion to take a few days off work and dig into the experience. So you're automatically my role model.
Yeah, I wish I bought it every year, but I do have cyclical leases and or purchases, and I do love that part, yes.
That's amazing. I wish I'm more like you, Nicole, right? I am self-admitted novice. I don't love negotiating. I swear to you, this is true. My CRO told me last week, he thanked God I was not his divorce attorney. So I'm here to get better at negotiating with you guys. Here's what it's going to look like. We're going to start fast and furious right out of the gate with quick tips from the panel. We're going to dig more into negotiating for ourselves, for jobs, promotions, raises. Then we're going to pivot into negotiating deals and contracts. And if there's any time left at the end, we're going to take those questions. So panel, are you ready? We're going to do some fix it fast. So to do that, I'm going to stop share so everybody can see your faces. The first thing I'm going to do is a quick round robin. 30 seconds or less, love it or hate it when it comes to negotiating, and why. I'm going to go Brady Bunch style, and David, you're at the top left of my screen. You're up first.
Fair enough. I guess I'll kick things off by saying, I enjoy negotiations most of the time. I think we negotiate things every day without even thinking about it, whether it's part of our business lives or our personal lives. Great example of negotiating your car lease, but sometimes it's as simple as negotiating something small with your significant other or with people at work. And as CEO of Ascent Cloud, I often get involved with either large contract negotiations or some of our customers and partner contracts, as well as I think we're going to touch a little bit on salary negotiations as well. So I'd say love it from my standpoint.
Nice, thank you. Good. Amy, you're next on my panel.
I'm right in the middle between love it and don't like it. And the reason being is, in my mind, it's just a conversation. And so, there are conversations that I love to have, and there are conversations that I don't love to have. And depending on the complexity of the situation, that's going to invoke whatever feeling. I'm not afraid of it. It doesn't give me hives. It's merely a conversation.
Good. I like that. Tip number 1 is this is a conversation, and you have them all day long, whether you realize it or not. Nicole.
Yeah, I'm definitely with Amy. I mean, I'd say I just accept it as a way of, you're constantly doing it all the time. And I certainly prefer working with someone in good faith to get things done and more focus on great things. So I definitely have a preference towards negotiating on behalf of an organization, a company, an entity outside of myself, as you premised.
As I told everybody in your intro.
Because it's easier to kind of be objective about that win-win and the sustainable outcomes. It's a little bit tougher to be objective when it's kind of, your bottom line versus someone else. So it's complicated for me, I guess is the best way to say it.
All right, good answer. Michelle, I've saved you for last because we know you love it. Give us your point of view.
Yeah, so I would say I hate negotiating with my kids, and they're exceptionally good at it. Right now we have pier steers and ballet shoes on the table with my 8-year-old, and she's winning right now. So I don't like negotiating with them, but I love it otherwise. I really love it, love it, love it. I take it as sport, and I love to win. I think, hopefully we all do. I love to win, but I really think of negotiating as a strategy. And so I like challenging myself to how do I structure the best personal strategy to yield what I'm looking for. And I really like that aspect of negotiation. So I love it. I've shared with you, I do it for sport in my personal life. Professionally, I have to face it every day. And I enjoy it.
I think that's cool. What's funny is I love negotiating with my kids. Mine are young as well. I've got an 8 and a 9-year-old, and I just think it's so cool when they get it. Now it's annoying when they don't stop, right? But it's so cute. They're like, "Will you give me $1? No. Will you give me a penny? Yes." Now let's talk about that. Could you have asked for more in that second round?
Right.
So, and maybe I love it because I actually feel like I'm an expert compared to an 8-year-old. All right, we're going to do fix it fast. Best piece of advice straight out of the gate. Amy Volas, you're up first.
Yeah, so it's going to go back to having that conversation. And Michelle, I totally, this is not to throw shade at you at all, but I don't look at it as a win-loss situation. And I think when people look at it as a conversation and seeking to understand and being transparent in that, it doesn't have to be there's a winner, there's a loser. You can meet in the middle to get things done. And so again,
and that feels like a win, right? Like when you're meeting, it's a win, right? Amy, your lens doesn't surprise me either, by the way, on that, because as you're, negotiating talent and brokering talent, you're doing both sides. It has to have both sides be happy. So I'm sorry, I jumped in the middle of that. Finish up.
Well, no, I mean, in my mind, negotiation, when you understand the landscape, because you've taken the time to get it, right? And that speaks to discovery and rediscovery. And whether it's sales or hiring, it's all about that. It's when we make assumptions where we start taking left turns where that doesn't work out so well. So I celebrate the seek to understand and understanding what are all of the levers that go into this deal. Yes. Whether it's an offer or whether it's a deal, yes. There are lots of different variables and elements and different things that you can push or pull that might make me feel like I'm winning, mm-hmm. or might make somebody else feel like they're winning. And ultimately we can come together to do this thing. And
I
so
like that.
Have that mindset of how do we come together versus how do I win this deal or how do I get this job offer? It's more along the lines of what are the different things that I care about? And what are the different things that you care about? And let's have a cards face up on the cards. This is me over caffeinated.
No, but cards on the table conversation and the discovery, I think, is the key to that. Fully discovering the other party's wants and needs and your own.
And leaning into the fact that it is a conversation. We can be transparent and honest with each other and knock it out with the games. Like I have no time for that. Yeah. www.no.com for me.
Was that www.no.com?
Yeah. I mean, I don't even know if that's a URL. I'm sure
I
it
love
is.
It should be. I thought you said WTF and that works too. All right. Good place to pivot. Good place to pivot. I'm going to come right back to you, Michelle, because it's fun. I love a little drama on a panel. What's your number one tip?
Yeah. So by the way, Amy, I'll plus one everything you said. And I don't think that it is a win or lose either. I'll give you a quick example. But listen, my number one tip is take your time. I think sometimes when people negotiate, whether it's a deal, whether it's for themselves, there's this, you can feel tense, you can feel the adrenaline pulsing. And I think to your point, Amy, do your research. What are the levers you have to pull? Take your time. It's like stretch out that deal cycle a little longer than maybe your instinct is telling you, because you really want to take your time and make sure you're putting your own best foot forward. I'll give you an example of something I had to negotiate recently with my team. I'm trying to improve the ratios between my managers and reps. From, right now we have 9 reps roll up to a sales manager. I'd like that to be at least 7 to 8. And I have to negotiate with the finance team, Nicole, your people in the business, on
You're
like,
next, Nicole.
why make that investment? And so my win was coming back to my team to say, I'm going to improve your day-to-day. I'm going to improve your ability to invest in your team. And the loss isn't on the business. It's actually a net gain. But if I didn't get that, it would have been a loss for my team. And so it's really, how do we make it win-win? But part of that negotiating is being able to tell your story, craft your story and your strategy appropriately. And I still get a high off of that. And I get even more of a high when I get to go back to my team and say, you know what, I improved our headcount ratios. We're all going to have a bit of a better life and be able to succeed more effectively next year.
That's a
So
great example.
take your time, stretch it out, and know all those levers you have to pull, +1 to everything Amy added.
Yeah, nice. I think part of stretching it out is not just the discovery, but something I know you're going to share with us a little later, that it doesn't mean that you go into it with your best offer.
Mhm.
And that's where I fall down, right? This is where my CR was like, seriously, Lauren, like hold back a little bit, because I sort of automatically anticipate, Amy, you were talking about this assumptions. They won't go for that. I won't go for that. They'll counter with that. So let's just end up here, and I'm rushing it. So
Mhm.
that's super advice. Thank you.
Mhm.
Nicole, what's your lens on this?
Yeah, to me, I think it's interesting about kind of jumping the gun on you mentioning jumping the gun on kind of where you're going to end up. But I do think understanding what your bottom line is extremely important. And really often people go into a negotiation with the perspective of how to gain as much ground as you can, but not fully understanding where their bottom line is. And that can be dangerous if things go back and forth, because you lose track of kind of, if it goes fast and furious, and you lose track of what did you really want. And sometimes you walk away thinking, oh, wow, I really didn't want that, right? So really taking your time to think about your bottom line. And I've seen this work well, like when you've known it. I was involved with the team negotiating with a software vendor. We knew what our bottom line was. The vendor was being really inflexible. We knew it was their quarter end. We walked away. 2 days later, they came back and they came very close. And it was a win for them. They got their quota attainment. It was a win for us because we got what we needed. Conversely, I've seen it work the other way, where I was involved in a deal where there was a consortium of investors who really didn't have a consistent, unified view of what their bottom line was. They had their individual views. They didn't kind of align with it. And there was a kind of continual process where the buyer was coming back with things, and they just kind of wanted to see how much they could push the buyer, and time killed the deal. And so, when you do it, it works well for you, because at least you know where you're willing to stop and not go.
Yeah.
But it also, not doing it, particularly if there's an alignment of interests on one side of the table, could really, let it get away from you in a pretty bad way.
I love it. Knowing your bottom line gives you the clue when it's time to walk away or step away or pause.
Yeah.
But even better, when it's a group, know the group's bottom line. And that can be tough, which again, extends the time period. David, I can't wait to hear what you think of all this and what you're going to add.
Yep. Thanks, Lauren. And I'm actually going to piggyback off of something you said and something Nicole said. And essentially start with what you want and anticipate objections. So start with what you want. Don't pre-negotiate yourself down to a place where you don't want to be and you end up unhappy or going right to your best and final. Certainly you want to anticipate objections, but don't negotiate against yourself, essentially.
In the planning.
Sorry?
In the planning, don't negotiate against yourself, right? I know,
Exactly.
Here's what I want. Here's my back pocket or my bottom line. Here's what may come up, but don't let that conversation with yourself mean you're starting down here.
Exactly. So start with what you want. It's okay to hear a no from the customer or prospect, right? And then you go through that conversation like Amy was talking about to find the win-win.
Yeah. Tell me more about anticipating objections.
Well, certainly. I mean, I think Nicole was talking about this. You guys were talking about this before. Of you're putting out your initial offer, and based on what hopefully you've done good discovery, and you have an idea of what they might be coming back with. So just plan for when they say something, be able to answer it confidently, and make sure that you are, not reacting in the moment without having thought of the objection ahead of time.
Oh, I like that. You guys, is it okay to say, pause, I'll get back to you? If you're getting a counter offer or you're getting an objection that you haven't practiced answering, saying, thank you, I'll get back to you by blank. I'm getting lots of head nods. Yeah, that doesn't work against us. Good. I need that sometimes, because otherwise, if you're not prepared, you're trying to do it on your feet. All right. I want to go right into job offers, right? Promotions, job offers when we're negotiating for ourselves. Big companies have ranges or bands, right? The larger the company, the less flexible they are. Is that right, Nicole? Am I getting some head nods on how that works?
There's always flexibility, but yes, sometimes it's a little more rigid in a larger company than a smaller.
So explain that to us. How do bands work? How much wiggle room is there really? Do you have advice on making sure we're getting the higher band or a higher level in the band?
Yeah, so I mean, I'll start by saying this is actually changing quite a bit, and there's a lot of diversity of practices in this. But generally, as a company gets more mature, they need a way to kind of be clear and consistent with their employees about what it means to get from A to B and to go from this job to that job, and that's the leveling structure. There's typically an executive and a non-executive leveling structure, and typically pay ranges are much more narrow at the lower ends of those leveling structures and much wider at the higher ends of those structures. But each of those levels is typically anchored on a set of experiences, competencies, skills that are really required to demonstrate mastery to move on to the next one. And so as you think about, understanding how to negotiate for a new role or how to negotiate a promotion, it really starts with understanding your employer's compensation philosophy to begin with, and then within that, what is expected of you to, be performing well within your band and to master the band, and having an ongoing conversation with your manager about where you're at and where you need to get to make sure that there's no surprises. And so this can definitely vary in practice, but that is one common element that should transcend a lot of variety of practice.
You're getting lots of nods from our panel. So what I'm hearing you say is at the individual contributor level, it's a narrower band, but every leg up we go, management, senior management, et cetera, the bands get wider, which means higher earning potential for us, right?
Yeah, and there's more ranges. And so it could be, and that also makes it more room for negotiation, particularly if you're going into an executive role. There tends to be a wider range, which also means sometimes much more subjectivity, which could work for or against you, right? So that need to get really specific with your manager or the employer, what it takes to be within that range is a higher and higher bar as you get more and more senior because of that wide range.
Yeah, I'm already able to have more intelligent conversations in discussing the band. Michelle, how do we learn about the bands? How do we learn about how to get higher in the bands? What's your advice?
Yeah. I've gone through this recently, coaching other people on my team, people at other companies. And, I think you have to at least have the confidence to say, I'd love for you to walk me through kind of the compensation structure and where you're recommending I come in at, and, what that overall band looks like. And Nicole, to your point, asking, how do I get from this level to the next one? What does that evaluation process look like? How often is it? Do I get evaluated quarterly, throughout half the year? How will we have those conversations? Would it be once a month we check in on these? So I think that would be one. And then also, figuring out outside of the band, are there other forms of compensation? So, if it's internal promotion, it may not be a signing bonus, right? Because you're already within the company, but maybe it could include equity or it could include stock. So I would, again, slow down, take your time, prepare yourself, ask a lot of those questions. Depending on where you work, but I would recommend that as women, we continue to move the needle here. Is asking, is the female compensation and male compensation equitable at this time? And what is the company philosophy on ensuring that, women are equally compensated as much as our male counterparts? And
I love how you did that without blame right there, right? Even as you entered into the conversation, you said, tell me about and help me learn about.
And to be honest, I've actually had that conversation and they've said, Michelle, you're making more than everybody. And you're like, okay, we don't have to talk about this anymore.
Yeah,
But I also want to know. And in the past, I could only know if I had a good enough friend who would share with me what they're making. And that can be very uncomfortable among peers. So now I just try to put it out on the table. And thankfully, I work for a company that they really work very hard to ensure that pay equity. So I would recommend, moving the needle on that as much as possible.
I love it. I love it. Okay, so I'm going to go to David next. When have you, as a hirer, right, in your role at the top, when have you made decisions to say, I want to bring somebody in top of band or next band, right? How does that happen in the employer's point of view?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think Michelle and Nicole touched on a lot of good topics there. I mean, from my standpoint, most of the companies I've worked either for, with, and internally, have some sort of stack ranking at kind of what you're talking about. So I started my career with Accenture, and while I wasn't in those meetings, I know that they would actually stack rank every single person in the company first to last, which is definitely an interesting way to go about it. But I know that within the bands that you're talking about, I know a lot of companies, they want to look at your attitude, your results, your effort, and that all kind of goes into a stack ranking that how you get into kind of top of band or whatever the case may be. I think the great thing about sales, and assuming a lot of people on this call are in sales, is that we have more quantifiable results than a lot of other team members and companies. So obviously the most obvious thing to point to from a stack ranking standpoint is your output, your closed won deals. But I'm sure there's key initiatives going on at your company that are probably just a close second to closed won deals. Maybe it's bring a new product to market or something of that nature, taking on a new initiative. So those are some things you can help differentiate yourself if you're not necessarily top of band for, say, sales. And a lot of companies I'm seeing are using scorecards as well to keep track of those key performance indicators that end up leading to sales as well. Yes. So if you're consistently, top in any one of those areas, sales, the leading indicators of sales and or these kind of key initiatives, those are something I would make aware to your manager or supervisor as part of that discussion. And ultimately, while we can only control our attitude and effort, we can also control what we convey to our manager. And I think Michelle said it well, of understanding the cultural norms, but then also bringing the evidence to the table of, why we should be top of band.
I love it. Just investigating, hey, there are bands, right? Here's the one I'm in, and here are the competencies and everything that's defined in that band helps me know what to gather. So when it's raise time and promotion time, folks, the tip I'm hearing from David is snapshot your level 11, gamification boards when you're on the top, and snapshot your activity and what you've put and where you're stack ranked in your sales engagement, your outreach platform. Keep track of all of your wins, especially aligned to what defines the bands. So really good. Thank you. Amy, I know that you've got a lot of points of view on this. Anything that hasn't been said, and then I want you to pivot for me and talk about, has any of this changed during COVID?
So one thing I do want to make mention of as I was preparing for this conversation and thinking about it, I did some research, and Harvard Business Review wrote about this. And so they did a study, and this, I'm just going to read what I got. I was like, this is really interesting. The bottom line of our study is that women do ask just as often as men. They just don't get. Women ask for a raise just as often as men, but men are more likely to be successful. Women who asked obtained a raise 15% of the time, while men obtained a pay increase 20% of the time. So I'm just gonna leave that right here. So I don't think that it's that we're afraid to ask. I think it's about the outcome. And Michelle, I've been where you've been, where I've had those conversations and they're like, you're making more than anybody else. And so it's like, oh, so it's not always doom and gloom. But the one thing that I'd add here is it's how you show up. And Nicole, I believe you used a very key word that most people take a major left turn when they should be going straight ahead. Specificity. Specificity is your friend. How you show up to be specific about quantifying or qualifying what you want. So David, you mentioned, what is it that I want? Well, guess what? I want to be a size 6, but that's not my reality. I want a lot of things. And so I think it's about, well, what do I want? Why do I want it? And what is the reality of this situation? Back to, what am I cool to settle with? Mm-hmm. And so, I think through those different items, I was making notes all over the place, but remember, buyers are just like hiring managers. They care about three things when they're evaluating you, regardless of the band here. This is for an SDR. This is for a CRO. How do you help me get better? How do you help me solve problems? How do you help me reach goals? And the fourth point to this, when it comes to hiring, is, and how will you be on the team? And how will you be in front of my buyers? If you have not specifically done a good job to quantify or qualify what I've done, how I've done it, where I've done it, who I did it with, what the outcomes were, the lessons that I've learned, and how does this help you? We're in this world of everybody's thinking about me, two-way street. So when you stop for a second and you think about their task at hand, that's how you go up in the bands.
Nice. Nice. Give me the three again. How do you
help me solve problems, right? So like in sales, everyone's talking about problem solving. That's awesome. If you can help me solve a problem, I'm good.
Yeah, but what are you helping me solve, and show me proof you've done it before?
Correct. But it's not just all the doom and gloom of the problems in my business. How can you help me get better?
Yeah.
How can you help me reach a goal?
Yeah.
Those are, and if you can do all three things, like you're in the Mecca, like that's amazing. But it doesn't always have to be about solving problems. Like if you can really help me get better as a leader on the team, and you can illustrate that, it's not necessarily about my problem.
Yeah.
It's about rounding out the team that way.
Yeah.
And when you can do that, and David, you spoke my love language, a scorecard. For people that are hiring on this call and for people that are looking, you got to be using a scorecard. And if you don't know what that looks like, Google my name, Sales Hacker Scorecard, and there will be two different templates, whether you're hiring or you are looking.
I love it.
I digress. So do I think it's changed in COVID?
Thanks.
I think people are much more willing to lean in to have vulnerable conversations than they've ever been. I think, as with anything though, it's how you show up. So I'm a big fan of understanding the bottom line, right? But also understanding that there's a lot more to this than just comp. Big company, small company, what are the different levers? Nicole, I believe you mentioned equity. That would be a nice lever. Ideal in startups, it's a real big lever that people think about.
Pause for me 1 second, because we're going to go round robin and get these from everybody, okay? Yeah. It's not always base salary that's on the table, all right? So our goal is to create a list of 20 levers. Everybody gets 20 divided by 4, 5. Amy, you get to go first.
Okay, so one would be equity, right? One would be remote work setup, right? Are you going to compensate me for what it's like? You're saving some coin having an office.
Yeah.
How are you going to compensate me? People don't think about that, right?
Good one.
I mean, come on, girl, I came prepared.
Right?
Like if I didn't come prepared.
Our research. Look at
That's
you.
the thing about negotiation. Come prepared. Do your homework.
Right. That's right.
Out all those things.
We're at 2.
That's one. The other is some people care about optically. What does the title look like? Bonus structure and amount.
So what's the difference between structure and amount? And then we'll move on. Michelle, I'm going to do
what is the amount of the bonus structure? Like, what are we dealing with here? So it's like, it's not an and, it's it's not an or, it's an and, I should say.
Okay.
And then my real ability to grow. If I do this, what happens next? Because here's the thing that I'll say. If you don't get all of the money that you want, which that happens all the time, and so many people rely on hope. I'm hoping that I get this. I'm hoping that they offer me this. Mm-hmm. Cut it out with the hope.
Yeah.
Right. Like the more you know, the better prepared you can be. Do you understand why and what needs to happen to get there? Because when you understand those details, you can negotiate tangible milestones that tie back to the 5 that I mentioned to get those extra dollars versus hoping for the future. And there's a roadmap together to get there. Okay, so sometimes I have to get. Yes. If I'm giving to get, are these the things? And not the dangling carrot of like, but wait, there's more. Do this, I'll give you more. It's tangible and it's agreed upon mutually together.
Yeah. Okay, Michelle, I know that you've got some great value add to this. We were talking about how do you climb the bands, right? How do you do those things? So take that and go. You're 5.
Yeah, I would definitely recommend an agreed upon evaluation criteria, as well as time to check in. So, I'm thrilled to take this job. Really, I would have liked to have come in at another level. Would you agree that we can check in once a quarter on agreed upon areas that I can move the needle? And at 6 months, we can reassess my development. And so negotiating that there will be an active coaching plan and development plan, I think, is a really strong one.
I have to time out you for 1 second. If you can, say it again.
Yeah. So,
right? Thank you. I wish I had come in at, can we agree? Do it again.
Yeah. No, I'm thrilled to come on board. Thank you for having me. I really wish that I could have come on at a higher level. That said, would you be open to an active evaluation period where we check in once a quarter and we have a 6-month and 12-month period of time where we see where I am against agreed upon qualitative and or quantitative metrics?
And reassess my compensation at that time, right?
Exactly.
That's the goal.
Yep.
Okay, beautiful. All right, next point.
Yeah. I mean, that one, I would also say a flexible work schedule. So obviously a lot of us are working from home, but there might be an expectation that you are live and online during certain times. One of the things I always do with my team is I am like not available on email or Slack during really like 5:36 until 9 o'clock, if not later. And I say, that's my family time. If you need me though, you can reach me via cell. And so I negotiate that that's okay ahead of time. I share that with my team. So just the flexibility of a work schedule. This one I love. An investment in your professional development. So depending on what level you're at, would you invest in an executive coach for me? Would you invest in advanced sales training for me? Would you invest in management courses? Some companies obviously have this as a bit of a stipend for learning development, but some don't. And as you're moving up, asking for that professional development, I think, is another great thing that you can negotiate and pays dividends forever.
Yeah, these are so good. Did we get to your 5?
Let's see. Listen, if you're traveling, you got to use your car lease. I would recommend that one. And listen, I know most of us are working from home. That used to be a hot one back in the day, but my guess
it can be again.
It can be again, but that's one that I've always loved that list. And, then Amy, you had mentioned the equity, for me, stock has been a big piece of how I get compensated. And so I've negotiated, what percent of my comp will actually be stock versus salary and all that. So even being able to negotiate the percentage of that compensation so that it's in your favor in one way or another is another area that I've worked through.
Nice. Oh, thank you. Super good list. David, I'm coming to you next. And I want to ask you first your advice on stock. At what level, right? You've risen all the way to the top of 2 organizations. At what level do you actually start talking about equity and stock? Is that something you offer new hires? Like, do my BDRs out there ask for that? The managers?
Yeah, good question. I'm sure a lot of people at Ascent Cloud would be interested in how I'm going to respond here. But so the short answer is it's certainly not something that everyone has. And I certainly believe in the philosophy that you reward your best people even more. I guess the biggest rewards come to the best performers, essentially. So as people become top sellers, leaders within the organization, that's kind of when those things kind of become unlocked, to answer your question. So it's not something that we typically do in an offer letter. It's something, I think, to Michelle's point, I have had people ask, oh, well, if it's not available as part of my offer, can we revisit that in 6 months or a year? And I've definitely had those conversations in the past. But yeah, typically it's after they've had tenure with the company and kind of shown that they're committed over the long term from an equity
standpoint. Leader level, so north of director. All right, tell us more. What's on the list? What else have you seen negotiated?
For sure. So certainly a lot of things. I think you guys, Amy and Michelle, kind of cleaned out most of them, the easy ones.
I know, right? Be glad you're not Nicole. She's going last.
I'm trying to think if there's much else to add. I didn't hear PTO in there. That's something I've heard in the past of, the standard PTO policy is X. Could I get, these days, if for a new hire might be because they have trips already planned, or just because maybe it's not in line with what they've had previously. So that's one I've seen negotiated if you're not happy with the overall compensation structure. Yeah, I think career development just as a whole, I think you guys touched on a lot of the pieces of training and also revisiting titles and things at certain times, but career development certainly one. I have to admit, I think most of the rest of mine were covered by Amy and Michelle. So
We
great
scraped
job.
the bottom of the barrel. So thank you, David. So Nicole, you've seen so many, like you have the dollars and the cents from behind the scenes. What else have you seen? Anything?
Yeah. So obviously this is a great list, and I'm not going to repeat, but I will +1 all three of those amazing lists. I can add a couple things to it. So I would say the one thing that I have seen is job scope. So in terms of coming in as, you know, an individual contributor versus a manager, maybe you can negotiate to be a team lead. So, you know, you can get some experience and so incremental experience in some way is one area. I'd say to add to the professional development thing, dedicated mentors are another thing that we've seen or done in the past, which is a very specific ask around professional development. But last, I'll leave and this might just be how to manipulate Nicole as a CFO, but the one thing that generally works pre-COVID is one-time things are a lot easier to negotiate than on things that increase your run rate. So a signing bonus, a one-time relocation bonus, like one-time things, you can usually win over a finance crowd on that because it doesn't increase the run rate. It's not a salary that increases. So those individual one-time things that you can think of and add the list to are usually things that are a little bit easier for someone to concede on.
Now, you did say pre-COVID. Is the general assumption that we're all just damn lucky to be employed? Let's not go ask for more right now.
I mean, I think it depends on the industry you're in. Certainly my former employer is in a counter-cyclical space, right? And so, you know, they're hiring and they're in competitive markets for engineers and talent. And so I would say, you know, in industries like that, I'd say the game is still there. I'm on the board of a nonprofit, you know, it's probably not the right thing for the people being hired on a nonprofit when other people's are furloughed. So when you're asking for these things in COVID, I think you have to think about, you know, what is acceptable and what is not tone deaf, right? And so it's certainly just because it's COVID doesn't mean you're entering a space that can't accommodate some of these things. And in COVID, for industries like you know, e-commerce and things that are benefiting from this in a slightly perverse way, it might be easier for them to imagine that one-time thing is better anyway, because you don't know what the world's going to look like post-COVID. So in that sense, one-time things I think are generally more acceptable, but before you ask for money during COVID, I would really understand the reality of the employer to know if that's going to come across as very tone deaf. You don't want to start out that way.
Nicole, I have a left field question for you. Don't you love it when I ask things I didn't tell you I was going to ask?
Sure.
Is there a standard, like, I'm sure it varies, right? But can you average out for us a standard sort of cost of living, you did well, pay increase in most companies, right?
Yeah.
My basic research said it's somewhere between like 2 and 5%.
Yeah, I think that's about right. I mean, I think that the ranges most companies will publish or say informally will be that pay increases can range 0 to somewhere in the low single digits, right? And promotional increase, and that's, you know, without big market adjustments and big dislocations. I would say the average pay increase is somewhere in the 2 to 3% range. But it definitely is contextual. If you're in a market like, you know, in my space in tech, data engineers, data scientists, there are certain spaces where the market rate moves so quickly that even without merit-based increases, those promotions can go up, whereas there's other industries where there's more compression and competitiveness in the space. And so it's more complicated, but that's 2 to 3% is about the average.
All right, interesting. How about off-cycle raises? So I'm going to start with Nicole and see if anybody else has input on this. I'll share a story. We did a webinar like this last year, and it was about asking for promotions. And one of our speakers, Liz Kane, who's just phenomenal, said, listen, you know this, right? I managed a team. It was, I'm going to make up the number, 20 men, 20 women, all were managers. And in the span of a year, every single one of the men came to me and asked for an off-cycle raise. right? So it's not annual review time. We didn't pre-establish I was going to have a quarterly look at this. They all came and asked for more women, more money, but none of the women did. That's not on the list for compensation. What's the insight from the client point of view, from the CFO point of view? The company looks at, how do you perceive off-cycle raise requests?
Yeah, this is definitely varies by company, right? And it really depends on the strength and the consistency of the compensation philosophy of the company. I've worked with companies where this was the way to work around the 2 to 3%, and it was gamed a lot and it was abused a lot. And if you're on the CFO receiving end of it, you have a very jaded perspective and you tend to set very rigid boundaries at a department level around that, so that you force those departments to make the trade-offs and you're not always, being asked on a continuous basis to increase it.
Yeah.
The one operational challenge I'd say with out of cycle increases in general is that usually a company has 1 or 2 pay cycles, and that allows you to maintain consistency, to have a very objective evaluation, to maintain gender pay equity. Like, you can take the time to do those things in those moments. And so there's lots of good cultural reasons why you have pay cycles in that way. And so I would say more and more, there's a lot, you always have to do a dive and save for someone who's valued, who has another offer or something like that. But in general, if it's just a, hey, I'm good and I deserve more conversation, my observation is that it's less and less entertained and engaged, and particularly for some of these other reasons around maintaining consistency and equity.
All right, cool. I love that. I also love the dive and save. So know that if you're a superstar and you haven't gotten a raise in a long time, there could be a dive and save for you. Amy Volas put in chat, guess what? If you're in sales, your raise is the upside. Yeah. And that's so very often true. David or Michelle, anything else quickly on that topic before I ask my next question?
I'll go first. It looks like Michelle's on mute, but I'll echo what Nicole said. I mean, we personally have a policy where we do performance reviews at the beginning of the year, and then we do compensation reviews separately, a month or 2 after that, just to keep it consistent for all the reasons Nicole said, of 1, from a budgeting standpoint, 2, from a fairness standpoint. So I think understanding the cultural norms of your organization, of does it, like, when to ask for raises and when does it make sense. That being said, if there's promotions that are happening off cycle outside of that annual period, I think it is probably fair if you're being promoted. So that's a good option outside of the normal pay cycle. But I agree with Nicole of just saying I want more money in the middle of the year outside of any other kind of triggering event might not be received as well. But it's different at different companies for sure, as Nicole indicated, but we're doing our best to, keep it consistent for everyone in the organization.
And that's the stuff we're supposed to find out, right? As we're interviewing for the job, what the cycles are. And yes, it's okay to ask your boss and people out there, saying, help me understand how it works and what the cycles are and what's available and how I advance. And this is important to me, isn't the same as saying, pay me now, damn it. Right. So It's okay to do those things. So speaking of using your voice, I did an informal poll on LinkedIn a while back and said, how many rounds do you typically negotiate your salary? Right. So I'm going to ask the panel to hold up a number of fingers. What's the number of negotiation rounds that you would say is normal or average, or what you aspire to do? 0, 2, 3. Is that 11, Nicole? 1.5.
1.5.
Yeah. So in my informal poll, women came in at about 1 and men came in at about 3. So just know that going in. Michelle, this is why you are at the top of the range at 3. I love it. But Amy, you clearly have a point of view here at 0. Hit us.
I do. And you and I, you struck a chord with me when we talked about this, when we were planning this. And so, I mean, look, I think it should be known that I started my company 5 years ago to fix what's broken in recruiting. And this is part of that. It does not have to be a game. It doesn't have to be a thing. And I prove this every day with my clients. Part of why I say 0 is by the time you get to the offer, there should be no hidden surprises. It should be a collaborative 2-way discussion to understand what's important to me, my bottom line, my whys, what I've done, how I've done it, all the things, and for them as well. And so that when it gets time to offer the job, I mean, how many times, just show of hands on the panel here, have you talked to somebody or it's happened to you where it gets to offer and you're so far off, it's an emotional feeling then, and you're pissed.
Yeah, I don't
Right?
get there. I
And
don't
it-
let myself get there.
Yeah, and it doesn't have to be that way. And so, I mean, literally, I just had a conversation with an SVP of sales candidate for a role that we're working on. And I said, this is a little strange, and I know it. But here's the thing. We have to talk about this now, because if we wait till the 11th hour, when there's been no conversation and emotions are running high, and I just give you a rando offer because I'm assuming everything, you're going to get really icky. It's going to get really icky. They're going to get really icky.
Yeah.
And it doesn't have to be that way.
Yeah.
And the reason why it doesn't have to be that way is 99.5. I've done my research for what we're doing here. 99.5% of my offers are accepted without any back and forth.
Okay. So it's all in the planning and the prep. I will tell you, I'm hiring positions right now. And in our very first conversation, we very clearly and transparently say, this is a qualification call. You're going to check me out. I'm going to check you out. We're going to decide if we're going to stop wasting each other's time. What do you need to jump? Like, and if we're way off base at the beginning, why are we wasting each other's time?
Well,
All right.
what is that place of yes for you? What is important to you? Like, people just start showing up and throwing up, and they don't understand like what's important to you. What, just like in sales, you don't just roll out with a proposal without understanding anything about what you're doing. And when you do, and you connect those dots, what is your win rate? It goes up. It's the same thing with this, right?
It's
So it's
truly
like,
a sales process, isn't it?
they're not dissimilar. And so, and not to be so vocal about this, but I don't think it has to be the game that we make it. And when you are very clear about what you need, why you need it, all the things, and you can clearly articulate that, it's just like in an interview, people are afraid to speak up, to say, this is what's important to me, because they think that the role is going to be pulled from them. Here's my best advice. If the role is going to get pulled from you because you asked a question, probably not a great place to work.
I just love your lens on it, Amy. Thank you for that. Because in working with employers and employees through this whole time, Amy's pulled out all the emotion, right? Because what makes it emotional for us is fear. What makes it emotional for us is a lack of confidence or a feeling of entitlement or getting screwed over in the past or all the million things that build our story. But when you strip away the story and you just stack needs against value and open the conversation and do that, it pulls all of the animosity out. All right, I'm going to switch gears for us a little bit. We've talked mostly about negotiating our salaries, but I want to give a couple good tips, if they're different, on negotiating sales contracts. So we're going to lead with your best advice. You're negotiating a big deal or a contract. David, will you go first this time, please?
Tips for negotiating a big deal or a contract? Just to repeat the question.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Again, some of the tips that we kind of covered already, but certainly kind of go in knowing start with what you want. And to Amy's point, we can't all, I don't know what size I am, but I certainly don't think I could fit into a size 6 either, but you need to start with what's reasonable, but also kind of more in your favor, back to that point.
Let's start a little high.
Yeah, but you need to anchor where you want to be. I think a good usually advice in negotiations is be the one to make the first offer. I've certainly been in situations where people have anchored me low or I've anchored them high. I think there's been conversations around when to split the difference, and it kind of depending on where the conversation starts, and how that conversation goes. But yeah,
but overall, you like to go first. Is that right? You like to be the anchor.
Assuming that I've done my homework, as Amy said, if I just go out and throw out a proposal without knowing anything about them, from a sales standpoint, I'd like to know, what technologies are they using? Ideally, what's their budget? They're not going to tell me what their budget is, but getting a sense of how do they value this? How important is this to them? From our standpoint, we often find that we're able to combine multiple software solutions into one contract that will save them money, even though the individual pieces might be more expensive than the point solutions they have today. So to try to unlock those pieces of value, and that certainly isn't, a one-call close. That goes through a good discovery process. I'm sure Michelle's got an even better answer than what I came up with.
Oh, I loved it. Though. Unlocking additional areas and points of value is good. Michelle, take it away.
Yeah, I just adding to that. I mean, I think with any deal negotiation, you got to have stuff in your back pocket, right? So you're never going to the table, throwing the kitchen sink at them. And knowing what some of those levers are. So some of those levers that might be important to a business, like a startup, might be your financing terms. Do they want to be on a monthly billing cycle versus quarterly versus, annual? What's more important to them? Is it the deeper discount right up front? Is that more important to them? Is it more handholding during the onboarding and implementation process? And do they need better servicing? So it's really knowing your buyer, knowing what's important to them, what's going to set them up for success, and then being able to use those levers accordingly. And then also, what are some of those non-financial kickers you can throw in to sweeten the deal? And for us at HubSpot, for example, it would be, we know some companies that for free would write your, early blog posts. If you're getting up and running, you want to start your inbound content strategy. Will that help take a little bit of that burden off your shoulders? What are those, intangible, the added value benefits that you can, really add in at the very end to make people feel good, and that's going to help their business, but it doesn't hurt your bottom line.
I love that. Again, we're listing levers for salespeople, aren't we? It's good. I like that. Anything else? Amy, any tips on, you've negotiated millions in sales deals, right? Top tip.
Transparency. And if you really want a great framework for this that I absolutely subscribe to and wholeheartedly believe in, Todd Capone wrote a book called The Transparency Sale. Chapter 11 speaks to transparent negotiation and the 4 levers of negotiation. One's volume, one's timing of cash, one's length of commitment, and one's timing of the deal. And when you do that with your cards face up on the table, it doesn't make it icky. You're having a collaborative discussion. So we care about timing of cash. Here's why. What can you do? Instead of the icky tactics that are starting to happen at the end of Q4, people are like, but wait, there's more. If you sign by the end of the month, I'm going to give you 99.9% off. Guess what? If you can give me 99.9% off now, you can do it later, and watch out for renewal time, because I'm going to remember that. So I don't think it has to be tactics. Like, my number one thing is cut it with the tactics, cut it with the talk tracks, understand what your levers are. And those 4 are typically the ones that are the most prevalent.
Most common in discounting, et cetera. Yeah.
Exactly. And Todd Capone's book is wonderful, and that chapter 11 nails it.
I love that. Thank you. Really good. Again, it's down to discovery, isn't it? Nicole, you've seen a lot of deals signed behind the scenes. Any tips?
Yeah, I mean, I think building on what others have said, I think the thing that works least with the CFO in particular is, this is the price structure, this is the discount everyone gets. Like, when you frame the deal in terms of how this deal compares to what everyone else got in a very structured and agnostic way, it doesn't really matter. Like, to me, every single time we sign a contract, every single time we buy something, it needs to create value. I'm investing in this to get some outcome. And so it doesn't work well with me, particularly if it's a new investment, to say, well, we have to go buy this, and their list price is 100 and we're getting 80, and that's great. Like, because this is all the thing. Like, I don't care what customers got. I don't care if everyone got 50% off or 20% off or 80% off. I want to know, what are we paying? What are we getting for it? Why should I even invest in it? What are my alternatives? And any vendor and procurement team who presents it to me in that way, we might be getting a 5% discount, and I usually ask, so it's not going to get past me, but you tend to be more negotiable in those things that people tend to get more dug in on. Yeah. If you frame it in the sense of, you're giving us this money, but you're getting this outcome, and it's giving you this result. And it makes it easier to do fast. And it's also less, race to the bottom in terms of.
I love it. Show the value, not the standard discount. Here we go. I'm going to go rapid fire questions. I would like to know from Carissa more best practices to request additional equity for promotion. Current policy is giving new hires X for 4 years. I'm coming up on a promotion at year 3 of 4. Do I negotiate for an increase on that remaining year only, or more for the long term? Michelle, I think you might be the one to answer this. Yeah. Anybody else? Feel free.
Yeah, more for the long term. I mean, like, I would definitely mention, walk me through RSUs and, equity, and how does that work, and what can I expect? And will this be an annual refresh that I get? Just ask all those questions.
What's an RSU?
Restricted stock unit.
Thanks.
So it's a form of stock. Yeah.
Yep. Good. Anybody else quick something to add, or I'm going to go to another question?
Well, if you're gonna
Uh,
do that,
cool.
remember, you need to have it tied back to doing something to get it. So what are the milestones? What are the actionable items that I need to do to earn that? And get it in writing.
Good. David, you wholeheartedly agree with that.
I didn't mean to interrupt you.
Nope, that was great. And I want to piggyback on something Michelle said. Understand the type of equity. There's restricted stock units versus options. Just understanding the overall equity plan of a company is important as well. And there's private companies versus public, and obviously there's lots of different ways people do equity. So just understand what the equity situation is when you're asking. That can also lead to the questions that Amy was talking about of, okay, now that I understand it, how do I get it?
Yeah, good. Good. I love it. Thank you for that. I'm going to take the last minute to make a few recommendations to folks. I loved seeing in chat, somebody wrote in, I'm following these people on all channels instantly right now, and I cannot recommend that more. I'm going to show you how you can get a hold of them. I'm going to pitch Girls Club Generation 3. If you like this kind of content, you get that times a million in our Girls Club Management Certification Program. We only open applications once a year, and they are open now, and there are scholarships available right now. Thank you to our sponsors. Speaking of sponsors, please support Level 11 by Ascent Cloud and Outreach. I'm going to put their chats in one more time. These are tools you need to think about as you're planning for next year. Very, very important. And here's how you can find all of our panel. So of course, stalk them and follow them immediately on LinkedIn. And if you'd like to connect with them outside of that, write down their email addresses right now before you go. And in 10 seconds, I'm going to switch over to mine. I will hang out for another 5 minutes for people who have questions that didn't get answered. We will be sending out the recording to everyone along with a few tips. I thank you so much for the awesome engagement during this. Here's my email address and phone number and websites. And I just want to say thank you one more time to our amazing panel. Let's give everybody a round of applause. You guys were awesome and fun. You guys were just rocked it. Really great advice, really good discussions. The chat was on fire with wonderful feedback for you. And I thank you for your time and dedication to helping this cause. And, you know, it was a theme throughout it, the idea of gender equity and helping women use their voice and find their voice. And whether it's in a sales contract or a promotion, it's important. And I learned a lot today. Thank you.
Well, and LB, for anybody that's here, that's still here, what you're doing with Girls Club, and for anybody that's on the fence, please just jump into that deep end. You have a phenomenal and remarkable and magnificent and all of the other big words that I can't think of off the top of my head. It is amazing in terms of getting better together and lifting women up. And I am here for that all day long. And the fact that you're leading by example is amazing. So for anybody that's here, that's thinking about it, just do it. Seriously.
Come and apply. Thank you. Thank you for mentoring with us. I really appreciate that. It is definitely my passion project, and it's inspiring to see the promotions and the movement. It's awesome. All right, everybody. Thank you. I'm going to go ahead and end. I'm going to double check quick on chats, just make sure there was nothing urgent that was coming in. That was amazing. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Amazing, fantastic, valuable. Thank you. That's what we'll end on. I wholeheartedly agree. Have great afternoons.
Thank you.
Thanks again.
Thanks.
Thanks, everybody.